To have some lunch first and do some visiting and talking and catching up, as I see a lot of us are already doing. And then we're going to have our keynote speaker, Deb, speaking at 12:30, and after that we'll have our panel. So I'm going to have Elon Henhock. He's our cultural support worker here at SNP. He's going to do the opening for us today.
Dananda, Nanagan good then, Swatan Sios, when good and Havado. The Natogan Honda Vayon, what Ninisha did. Cadogan Sahoda, Nan, who got Chwick Ta. The Nidi got Senor Nan, and did Shavan. Igiguadine, had the Hogondak. Nene, Nan, a Griffon Hodongo. Shanisan Guayhoyasi, Hawayon, Hayagoyandak, Gangwa Honga Dogan, and Wadon, Nagani Quankson. And then you have it, then you look doggy. Tanginis go then. Down Konga, Gangwa Hong, or Gayan duck, Wadon, and the Gionico Hiostic. Down the D, hand need Wayandi, Nan, the Waxstone, the Goy Hodion, Wadon, Nan, Hook Desha. Down Tanginis go then, Tid Waye, the Horn, your Wagi. Nigitone, and Wayhua Nig. Ne on the one shot dig scan not the naga ne hay good ran on da did naga young with dog did voyon one initial day. I ain't got way go scan not net one up and yo. Da needed ne and we hig here Scott ne and voya ne and go nico ha Scott can and it and it was no on yo that again you tongue ne and go nico ha. And ne to go out in and watch your we. Ne nish and ho ya on the dog. Hawaii on it on again, the Angoy see the Gandraco, Ned one no hot, Ned one home qua. That again, Hawaii neg a guego, ne a high and two. Don't I the hong scan, no, ne a gon, don't hong, ne owen jaggy, ne go yard the gonstag. Daga do gandy nagas and you no need hot dan nes and ye ha. Da need it ne and we hig or ne and what they were ye no ni. Scotty naga, the tino hanyo, ne need in what owen jaggy, then go see the Gandraco. I go to the hard day on Sany ha, that again your tongue and go on go home. And our net of Wadi, Nan and watch we. Wado, Nagin against Guagi, we focus on Guahon, Nasani on Hoday Hondano, touch Nagis, Nasan Hawinan here. Da needed ne on your ways up, Nandanyo need of Dagi. So hard day on ne, Hodiwayana go scan on and one of the new. Da and we hate the owner and what they were yan on. On a naga, Nadi Tino Hanyo, Nadisaduno Hanyo, Goto, Nani Hoday Hondanyo, Hot Carver, that again your tongue, and go on go home. And our net of Wadi, Nan and watch we, Wado, gaining with doggy, Nan Hadon Yakiono. Danny Ganit, Ned young don't get sick, a Guego scan on Ned one of the new. And our Nadi, Ned the Yoxon, Nani Honky Hagi, Nani Hodid the Goy Shonk, Nevada, Hadid Nicodanyo. And needed and we hig or ne and they were yanoni, on an aditino hanyo, gaining with dog in a hadon yakyo, no nadiokia and don't, that again your tongue and go on to go on. And our net of Guadi, ne and watch your we, and it's to go on and ask on a day yo. The needed nega dog andy, Nasan Yoshagi, Nene a ho yoganda. Da needed and the yoni duck doggy, a son again, and got on doggy. Nanny, Sunny have a note there, go your gay hand, John, Nash and go this song. And needed and we hig or ne and they were yanoni. On a nan, this is one of your nanny should go on and gonna die yo, that again your tongue can go on and go home. And our net to get home and get and joke duck. Son home and get town on jardy, go your gay hand, John, so go this song, while don't know on your own way. And needed ne, how this nishagay, how this Sunday gay, how they on and get to set don't, why don't ne, how they don't shot. And needed ne, and we hig or ne, and what they were yanoni. On a nagan, and this is one of hanyo, how haggy, go here get hanagri, Nasa go this song, that again your tongue and go on go home. That's we hig the to the need nagan, nagat queenie. And then you are an ask what's what on that. Needed ne, a grief on Hodongo, Nagano Hanyok never an initial day. Da so hig the to the need naga, Nagavanagan hit, and then the Yoiwa, that again your tongue, ne, go on go home. Done it.
Yeah, why, Elin? So now we can start with our meal first here today. So if everybody wants to go up and grab some food, and like I said, we'll be having lunch first together, and then we'll start with our speakers. Yep.
If anybody wants corn soup with no meat in it, it's on the little crock pot that's on the counter there, but the other ones have pork and salt pork.
Okay.
And then there's fruit, vegetable, and ham and scones.
Okay. Yeah.
If anybody that wants no meat.
Yeah. So go ahead and start us. Sadekoni, everyone. Scano Soguego. We're going to get started now. If we can make our way to our seats. We have a speaker going to be sharing with us today. Okay, so welcome everyone, and Yahweh for coming. This is our third annual celebration of Indigenous Nurses Day here at SNP, and we co-host this with McMaster University's Indigenous Health Learning Lodge. To celebrate all of our student nurses, but all of our student nurses that have graduated and who are now alumni and working in the community, which I know many of you are. We wanted to be able to use this opportunity to, one, gather everybody together, because it's a great opportunity to network with some of our graduating students to see what they're doing now, but also an opportunity for everyone to get together themselves and reconnect and learn about the work that we're doing in community, but also celebrate that, right? Because it is a celebration, and we want everyone to know how meaningful the work is that they do as nurses in our community, and make sure that you guys are all celebrated for all of that work that you do. So last year we focused on pathways to Indigenous nursing education, and that was hosted at McMaster University. And so this year we're hosting here again at Six Nations Polytechnic. And our focus is on pathways in nursing careers, right? Because I know that there are so many opportunities in nursing, and we remind our students of that all the time. That there's so many ways you can go, and there's so many great opportunities, and there's so much work that needs to be done in our communities as well. And so we have some really amazing nurses who are going to be speaking to us today, ones that have worked in community and leadership in many roles, and they're going to share a bit with us about the pathway that they have taken to nursing leadership. Our keynote speaker today is Debra Jonathan. She is a member of the Turtle Clan, Cayuga Nation of Six Nations. She's a daughter, sister, wife, and mother of 4 children, and a grandmother to 10 grandchildren. She graduated nursing in 1995 from Mohawk College in Hamilton, Ontario, and she received her Bachelor of Science degree in nursing from Ryerson University in 2020. Much of her nursing career has been spent in community and public health and First Nations community in Alberta and Ontario. And for the past 25 years, she was employed by Indigenous Services Canada as a frontline community health nurse, nurse in charge, and nurse manager, working and supporting not only Six Nations, but First Nations communities in Southern Ontario, Thunder Bay, Sioux Lookout, and Moose Factory regions. From 2019 to 2023, she also acted in the capacity of Regional Indigenous Cancer Lead for the Hamilton, Niagara, Haldimand, Brant region. And in December 2023, she returned to Six Nations, the Grand River, as the Director of Wellbeing, managing departments of more than 465 employees. She's committed to a holistic system of health and a vision of well-being for community upheld through the foundational pillars of Haudenosaunee culture, tradition, and ways of knowing, which is woven throughout program development and service delivery. In her spare time, she enjoys gardening, camping, fishing, and spending time with her family, especially those grandbabies. So I want to welcome Deb today.
Scano, everyone. Debra Jonathan Nigaso, Aswege, Rogatenyo, Gayakdan, Liwagat Shoutdan, Gayokono, Mio Quenzodan. So as Amber said, my name's Debra Jonathan. I'm from Six Nations. I was born and raised here. I am Turtle Clan from the Cayuga Nation, and I am a mother. I'm a grandmother, a daughter, and a sister, and I'm a nurse. And so today, first of all, I want to welcome you to the Indigenous Nurses Day celebration of 2025, hosted by Six Nations Polytech. Before we can begin our celebration, I feel like it's also a time for us to reflect on our predecessors. And on the screen, you'll see Edith Montour. Edith was born on April the 10th of 1890 and she passed on April 3rd of 1996. She was born and raised here on Six Nations. She was of Mohawk descent and was the youngest of 8 children. She attended day school here, and she graduated from BCI, or the Brantford Collegiate Institute in Brantford. She graduated high school, which was a feat in itself because back then it was very difficult for Indigenous girls to graduate high school. Following this, she wanted to go to nursing school, but she had no luck applying for Ontario nursing schools because most post-secondary education institutions back then excluded Indigenous people from their rosters of students. And that was because of the Federal Indian Act, where people had to give up their rights to seek post-secondary education. So what did she do? She didn't give up. She seen a barrier and she went around it. So she looked to the United States, where she was accepted into New York's Rochelle Nursing School. And she graduated first in her class. And she became the first Indigenous registered nurse in Canada in 1914. During World War I, in 1917, she volunteered, and at the age of 27 with the United States Army Nurse Corps, she, along with 14 other Canadian nurses, went overseas with this Marine Corps. And for more than a year, she worked at the Base Hospital 23 in Vittel, France, treating soldiers injured in gas attacks, trench welfare, and at times she served in medical centers in France. She walked across battlegrounds looking for the wounded. Her work was both emotionally and physically exhausting. Another first that Edith allowed us as Indigenous women to have, she became the first female status Indian and registered band member to gain the right to vote in the Canadian federal election. Because back then, the Military Service Act had given wartime nurses the right to vote. However, Indigenous women could not legally vote federally until 1960. After the First World War, Edith returned home to Six Nations, where she married and raised 4 children. She continued to advocate for better Indigenous health care, and in 1939 was the elected honorary president of Oswego Red Cross. She worked at the hospital here as a nurse and a midwife on a casual basis until 1955, when she turned 65 years old and retired. This lady passed away at the age of 105 years old, just shy of her 106th birthday. It was a life well lived as a pioneer in so many regards, and her legacy paved the way for the rest of us to enter this profession, serve our people, and advocate for better health care for all. I want to take this opportunity to thank Polytech for giving me the honor of being the keynote speaker. During Nurses Week, we celebrate not just our Indigenous Nurses Day, but the achievements of First Nations, Inuit, Métis nurses, recognizing their invaluable work at improving the health and well-being of their patients. I graduated as a registered nurse in 1995, 30 years ago. And being the keynote speaker has allowed me to reflect on 30 years of work and where it has taken me in my career. But before I do that, I want to honor the people in my life who have grounded me. The people you see on the screen are my husband, my children, their partners, and my grandchildren. They are my medicine. They are who I go home to. They are who I can just relax with, laugh with, I can't completely forget about my work days because, as you know, as nurses, we often take that home with us. But being with these people allow me to let that go for a few hours in the evening. And I encourage you to have that support system in your career because you need it. You truly need it. Just people who allow you to enjoy life's blessings. So know your support system, appreciate them, and love them. These people are my medicine. I often get questioned, if you weren't a nurse, what would you be? And have you ever thought about that as nurses? What else would your line of work be if you weren't a nurse? For me, the next best thing, as Amber had said, would be gardening. I love being in the dirt. I love my hands in the dirt, planting, gardening, harvesting. That's where I would be if I wasn't nursing. That is soothing to my soul. But when I think about my choice in life, as a little girl, I'd play with my cousins next door. We'd be outside from dawn until dusk every day. We'd be in the bush, we'd be in the water, we'd be playing school, and we'd also play hospital, and that was my most favorite thing to do as a child. So I think right from there is where the idea was born. I also had great mentors. Ruby Jacobs, who was my aunt, Verna Fruch, who was my aunt, were nurses. They were my mentors. They are my mentors. But the little girl in me always wanted to do this. The little girl on the far left is my granddaughter, River, and the next one is my granddaughter, Reagan, both who want to be a nurse and a doctor, a firefighter, a police officer, and anything else that you can think of. What I want to stress here is the ability to encourage our youth and our young people to go into the profession, whatever profession they choose. We have to be that encouragement for them, their supporters and their cheerleaders as they make that decision. When I made the decision to enter nursing school, I was a single mother with a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I was on welfare. And I'm not ashamed to say that because it's made me who I am today. I knew that that was the life that I did not want. By the end of the month, our cupboards were bare. And I knew I needed to do something differently. Again, I had an amazing support system that allowed me to go back to school. I found an amazing babysitter. Some of you might know her. Her name is Chicky from New Credit. She worked with my schedule. If I had 7 a.m. hospital shifts, I was able to take my babies there early in the morning and she was up and ready for them. At that time, I didn't have post-secondary support because I was late going back to school. So instead, I had to get an OSAP loan. And I worked my way through school. I paid for my own university education out of pocket, and I continue to do that. Believe me, there were many times as a single mom in school that I wanted to quit. It was too hard. It was too taxing. But my mentors were always in my ear to keep going, keep pushing. I established a routine for myself and my children, one that they still talk about today. My oldest two often comment how they had to be in bed by 7 o'clock while all the other kids were outside playing. That was because that was my time to do my homework and get my assignments done. But we did it. The three of us, me and my 2 little kids, we did it. And graduation was one of the most memorable and happiest days of my life, because I knew that was my ticket out of welfare. And it was the day that I could provide for my kids. I remember the last day that my welfare worker came to my home. I gave her a gift, and we both cried. And she congratulated me and told me that that was the first time she ever received a gift from a client. But I thanked her for her support, because without it, I would not be able to graduate. And again, you might wonder why I'm sharing this, but it's to let everybody know that we all go through rough times. There's always a way out. This is my life and my truth, and it's made me who I am today. And one piece of advice that my grandmother always shared with us was, it's okay to look back, but don't stare. Take life's lessons and let them be your strength to continue on your path. And again, please encourage our young and youth to dream big, because they are worthy of good things. Be their support and help them to achieve success. And more importantly, let's support one another in this profession that we've chosen. As a nurse, we have the opportunity to heal the mind, the soul, the heart, and the body of our patients, their families, and ourselves. They may forget your name, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Another lesson that my grandmother taught us at a young age was always leave people in a better place than when you found them. Be forgiving, be understanding, and be caring. Hospital work, and for that matter, any type of nursing work, is stressful. It can feel unappreciative sometimes, but never ever leave the core values that we're taught as Haudenosaunee people. The values of respect, humility, kindness, and gonakuio, having that good mind. That will carry you through whatever it is that you're facing. My nursing career has taken me places where I have met the most beautiful people. And when I was thinking about this presentation, that's what it always came back to, was the relationships that I've created. It's not the accolades, it's not the degrees that matter. It's the lives and the hearts that you touch that matter. It's about the relationships. The beginning of my career after I graduated was right here at Six Nations. I worked at the Old Lady Wellington Hospital. And believe me, working in that building, it was scary. I came back as a home and community care case manager. That's when we first took home and community care over. And we brought back the homemakers to serve the community. I went from that role. Back then, Six Nations Health Services, there were 8 of us employees, just 8 of us. And we all fit in that little section of the Old Lady Wellington Hospital. Following the home and community care job, I then moved into the school nurse job, working at I.L. Thomas the majority of the time, Emily C. General, and again, working with the children. That was probably one of the highlights of my career, is working with our youth, listening to them and teaching them. Their minds are inquisitive. They ask a lot of questions. And the relationships that I've built there today, I see Ethan giving our ganyohanyo today. He was at I.L. Thomas when I was a school nurse there. You remember those children, and now they're grown and they have careers and they have families of their own. I moved to Calgary, Alberta with my husband and 3 children in 1999. My son, who came here to support me today, was 1 month old the day we arrived in Calgary, Alberta. And I remained on maternity leave. And when I was done, I happened to pick up the phone and I looked for a local First Nation because that's where I wanted to be. I felt so far from home. We had no family there. And I wanted so badly to be with Indigenous people. So I picked up the phone on a Wednesday. I happened to get the nurse in charge of the Tsuut'ina First Nation Health Center on the phone. I told her who I was, that I was a nurse, I was looking for work, I had my Alberta license to practice. She asked me if I could come in for an interview on Thursday, the next day. So I went to the interview, and on Friday, she called and asked if I could start Monday as a home and community care nurse. I had a friend out there who agreed to babysit for me, and off I went Monday to the Tsuut'ina Nation Health Center to work. I started out in home care, and then I moved over to public health nursing. That was where my career started with at that time it was Health Canada with the government. And the one thing I noted when I signed that contract was the difference in pay, going from Six Nations Health Services to a federal government position, and how there was a huge difference in pay, and I could not understand why that was. I spent 5 years in Alberta, and again, the thing that stands out for me is the relationships that I've created. This is where I was introduced to nursing leadership. I stepped into the acting nurse in charge job there, and I was asked if I would consider attending the Dorothy M. Wiley Nursing Institute for Leadership, and I did that. I flew to Toronto for a week for training, and then I had to go back to the First Nation and implement a capstone project where we looked at improving prenatal health for our young mothers in Tsuut'ina Nation. And we went from having maybe 2 to 3 mothers per month show up at prenatal classes to well over 20 attending with their partners once we really looked at how the program operated and what we needed to do, and we worked closely with our elders and our community members on what did they want to see in prenatal programming. I remember the very last session we had before I left. We had about 30 people and maybe about 20 elders at the event. And we changed that program where the morning became a shopping trip where our mothers went with our CHRs to the grocery store. They learned how to label read, how to budget. They would come back to the health center and they would cook the lunch. The elders would come in and we'd have lunch with the elders and we'd talk. The elders would share stories with these young women and their partners. The physician would come and get them to do their prenatal checkup, answer any questions that they had, and then the afternoon, we would do a craft, whether it was moccasins, moss bags were beautifully made, and that's what we grew from that leadership course, and the capstone project was a prenatal program that became so successful in that community. There are many stories I can tell you about my time there. One in particular that I want to share is about a little elder that I was privileged to be servicing. I'm going to call her Katie. Katie was 93 when I started to go see her. She had been through a time in her life where she did not trust healthcare at all. She avoided it at all costs because she was a little girl when the blankets were brought to her people, and it was believed that the blankets were infected with disease that killed a lot of the people at that time. So she would not seek health care if at all possible. But Katie had to have a kidney removed at that time. And when I was asked to go see her, I went with the CHR, Venora. Her name was Venora Big Plume. And Venora taught me about why Katie was the way she was and that she didn't speak English. She only spoke Tsuut'ina. So Venora and I went together, and she was my interpreter for the visit because I had to pack the wound daily until it healed. It got to the point where Venora didn't come anymore, so it was just Katie and I during my home visits. And I would write to her. Sometimes she could understand, sometimes she couldn't, or so I thought. During the last few visits, I would talk to her in English, and she started to respond to me in English. And I said, Katie, I said, you know what I'm saying? She goes, yes. I said, have you been able to understand all along? She said, yes. She asked me, do you have a kukum or a grandmother? I said, yeah, I do. I said, I have one at home, and I miss her so much. She said, I can be your kukum while you're here. And so we established this beautiful relationship, and I went to go see her despite her healing. We'd have lunch, we'd have tea together, and it became a beautiful friendship that I had with her. And on the day that I left my job, Venora and I went to see her one last time, and she gifted me with a beautiful pair of moccasins that I still have today. These are the types of relationships that I speak about when you think about your career. It's not about anything but how you interact with people. That's what nursing is. There were also some scary times, I'm not gonna lie, being out there by yourself. I remember pulling up to one gentleman's home for a home visit, and he comes through the door with a gun in his hand, pointing up. And so I stood there and I was in shock, and he said, hurry up and get in here. I said, why do you have a gun? He said, look up, there's a bear in the tree, now run. Those were memorable times for me. I remember being in the midst of a wild horse rampage, sitting along the side of the road and feeling the thunder, or so what I thought was thunder, and looking in the rearview mirror and seeing the wild horses just running with the dust all in the air. Those are memories that I carry with me in my career, things that I would never have experienced had I not gone to Alberta. I loved my time there. I love the people that I worked with. I still am in contact with some of them today. And I intend to make a trip back out there just to visit with some of them that are still there. But that's where nursing leadership entered my interest. It piqued my interest at that time. When I returned home to Six Nations, I was on maternity leave again, so I went and I took a 1-month-old with me to Alberta, and I came home and I had a 1-month-old baby. My youngest son, Nolan, came home. And so I was on maternity leave, and I was still with the federal government, so I had to look for another job, or they were finding jobs for me to apply to. And the job that they wanted me to apply to was a prison nurse out in Kitchener. And back then you had to go through the process. So I went to the interview. It was a 4-hour interview that I had to go through. And my mother and my husband were appalled to think that that's a career choice that I was making. They did not want me to work there. And I clearly remember my mom saying, I'm going to pray on this because I do not want you to go there. So I went through the interview process. I said, Mom, I have to do this. And the day before, I got a call that I got the job at the prison. I got a call from Gneos, from Dana Martin, who was the nurse at the time, saying, we have a position for you here at Gneos. I called up my mom and I told her, and she said, oh, I am so thankful. She felt like her prayers worked, and so my career started here at Gneos. I started out as a community health nurse, frontline community health nurse, and then I stepped into the nurse in charge role for 12 years. I worked with amazing people. I cannot say enough good words about the people that I worked with. They were dedicated. A lot of them were community members. And public health was something that we really strived to improve in the community. And then all of a sudden, we come up against the coronavirus. In 2019, over the Christmas holidays, is when I actually started to hear about this. It tweaked my interest. Any type of novel virus that I hear of in the news piques my ears, because I think, what is this going to become, and what are going to be the effects of it? When I returned to work after the Christmas holidays, I was contacted, and I was contacted by our community emergency coordinator. And the first thing he asked me was, have you been listening to the news? I said, yes, I have. I says, and I'm worried. This is where the disease started in Wuhan, China, and people were talking about it. And he asked, what do you think we should do? I said, I think maybe we need to start meeting informally to start planning for this. At least let's be prepared. So we did. We started having informal meetings as a group, as an internal group at Six Nations, looking at our pandemic plan, which we had been updating faithfully every year. We also began looking at our PPE stock. We also started to meet informally with our closest public health unit partners, Brant County and Haldeman Norfolk. We wanted to get ahead of this as much as we could. We had our first case in March of 2020, but we were ready. And then from there, we quickly assembled our COVID assessment center in April of that year. I remember meeting with Lori Davis-Hill. I don't know if she's still here. But we met and we started to look at how are we going to pull this together. We met on a Monday. We had to have our proposal in on a Thursday. I worked on Tuesday around the clock. I was at work until 12 a.m. in the morning, putting our first draft together. I went home and had dinner at midnight and continued working on this first draft so that I could present it to her the next morning, and I did that. We did our second final version. We submitted that on the Wednesday ahead of time, and we were awarded having our own assessment center here by the end of that week. The pictures you see here are some of the preparations that we had to do for that. And again, I really commend the community for their response. Going through the pandemic has taught me one thing, and that's that we can do anything as a community if we work together. That's exactly what we did. We were prepared. And in many aspects, we were ahead of the province. The province was announcing suggestions that we were already implementing in our community at that time. And I think that's a huge shout out to the people in this room. You know who you are, who walk that path with us. We gave it our all. We showed up every day when everybody else went home, and we got it done. And that's a testament to what we can do as a community and as a group of healthcare professionals when we're faced with adversity like that. Roll up your sleeves, continue on, and get it done. This picture here was the group that I worked with. They're my heroes, I have to say that. This is our public health team, not everybody's here. I managed to pull through a celebration of Nurses Week, even though we were on lockdown. But these ladies showed up every day. I remember getting on a Friday night, our hours were crazy. We worked anywhere from 12 to 16 hours per day during COVID. And I remember on a Friday night after they all went home, I happened to check the fax machine and there were 8 positives on the fax machine. So I put it out on the text for all of them, if I could at least have 2 of them come back to help work through those cases, because at that time we were required to have follow-up with positive cases within a 24-hour time frame. And on a Friday night at 8 o'clock, all of them came back, not just 2. We were thankful to the community, to Six Nations Health Services for feeding us, because who knows what we would have wasted to had we not had that support. I also remember the first death in our community. Having to make that phone call, I sat in the office with the nurse that had to make that phone call, because she was so emotional, she didn't know if she could do it on her own. So I sat in her office with her, holding her hand as she made the phone call. And then dealing with family members calling, begging us to be together during those times, and having to tell them no. That is probably one of the hardest things that we had to do as a group. But again, we held each other up through that. And then driving home from that evening, having to communicate to a daughter why she could not go be with her mother. It was awful. And trying to hold yourself together as the leader for your team, but driving home an emotional mess, just letting yourself release that. Again, I don't view these things as negative in my career. It's helped me grow. It's helped me learn how to have difficult conversations, and it's helped me learn how to support our community with tragedy. So these ladies here, I want you to know that they are heroes in my books, because again, they walked that road with me during COVID, and they showed up every single day to get the job done. In June of 2020, I was offered a nurse manager role. And when I asked my supervisor, why would you want to take me as a nurse manager at this time? It was because other communities were suffering with the pandemic. And so they wanted more support in other areas. I went from managing 32 communities in Southern Ontario. They added 18 more communities in the Thunder Bay zone. And then from there, they asked if I would then go to Saskatchewan for an outbreak that was happening. And I traveled there to help that community with support during that time. Again, I was away from my family for 3 weeks, working the same hours. But what I got from that was a lot of our communities were very similar. I stepped into a incident commander role. And at that time, that's when vaccines were just being released. The province managed the Operation Remote Immunity 1.0 and 2.0. 3.0, though, was immunizing children, and that's when the province stepped away and said they were not going to do that anymore. So what I did is I said, okay, I'll take that role, but you have to take something away, because I'm not going to be able to manage it all. And this is where I learned that it's okay to say no. When you know that you're being overburdened with responsibility, it's okay to say, I can't do that. Because it allows you to then really focus your energy into what needs to be done. As the incident commander, I was responsible for ensuring that children were immunized in the Sioux Lookout and Thunder Bay and the Moose Factory zones. And it required a schedule. It required working with other health authorities, the Sioux Lookout First Nations Health Authority, the Winnebago First Nations Health Authority. We worked with the Canadian military. We worked with Air Orange. We worked with local universities to pull together and train immunization teams to deploy into these communities every day. We started in November of 2022, and we immunized every day except the week of Christmas up until February of 2023. And in that time frame, we were able to deliver almost 11,000 vaccinations to the children. And we also did adults as needed. But it was a learning experience for me to fly into these communities, to see the resources that they don't have, and how we could try to improve that for them. Some of the pictures you see here are pictures that I've taken in my travels. The plane there you see is a little bit larger than what I was used to. I flew in a lot of tin cans that were very scary sometimes. But again, it was about getting in and out of the community. I've traveled on ice roads. And you don't question at that time the safety of things, because what you're focused on is getting into the community and getting to the people that need the service. But a career in nursing in the north is an eye-opener. It's a very different world up there. Communities that really need good, consistent nursing care. They go through nurses very quickly. Patients, unfortunately, have to repeat their stories over and over and over again to new care providers that are there for a little while. It really opened my eyes to what we have here at Six Nations. We think we have it bad. We're not even close to what some of those First Nations in the north have to go through. If you ever get the opportunity to travel and see for yourself, I would encourage you to do that, because it makes you appreciate what we have here a whole lot more. When I left the government, I was a nurse manager for a public health team. So what we did was, after COVID was winding down, we continued to have a public health team going into communities, trying to update vaccinations that have been left undone through COVID. And we were successful at that. 80 nurses and paramedics were trained to go in to immunize, and we were in communities every day. Sometimes we had 2 or 3 teams in a community at a time, but it was successful and we were getting the work done. That's when I was advised that the director role here was up for grabs. It was being advertised. And that was a very difficult decision for me, because I had been employed with the federal government at that time for 25 years. But there was something in here that was telling me that it was time to come home. And I prayed a lot that I was making the right choice, and I got my answers in subtle ways that I needed to follow my heart. And that's what I did. I have no regrets about coming home. I knew the job was going to be busy, and I was up for that challenge. I want our service to be a department of service excellence. I want us to excel at what we do. And this allows us to look at culturally responsive care. So Indigenous Nurses Day, it emphasizes that importance of culturally responsive care, recognizing that nurses that work in this community, because I don't want to negate the fact that we have Indigenous nurses, but we also have a lot of nurses that choose to work here at Six Nations who are not Indigenous. And we thank them for that, because out of all the places that they could work, they're choosing to be here. And we need to acknowledge that. But we have to advocate for culturally safe care for our community members, because we see in the media what happens to some of our people, and it's heartbreaking. I also had the opportunity when I returned home to sit on the emergency room panel that reviewed the death of Heather Winterstein. That was an emotional experience for me, because I could see very clearly what had gone on regarding her death. And it made me feel that there's so much more that we need to do as nurses to not allow behavior like that to happen. If you see somebody being mistreated, it doesn't matter what nationality they are. Our job as nurses is to speak up, but we're afraid to do that. We're afraid to speak up against one another's actions out of fear. But it's wrong. If you know it's wrong, then say it. That's what I took from being on that panel, is as hard as it is to speak up, we have to do that for our Indigenous people. Because at the end of the day, it's those people that are losing their lives in healthcare if we don't say anything. The last few slides I have are things that have just come about to me in different ways. One thing I want to say is that mentorship and support, again, is vitally important. There's a need for mentorship and support for Indigenous nursing students, fostering a strong and vibrant Indigenous nursing community. We need more Indigenous nurses in this field. We need more voices. We need more people who understand what it's like to live in a First Nations community. And we need them to exercise their voices. We need to lift them up to get into the profession and to carry it on. I also can't stress the importance of supporting one another, holding each other up, because like I said, it's difficult work. It's only a short trip, and this picture really spoke to me when I seen it, because I cannot believe that 30 years has passed by. I'm now going towards the end of my career. I'm going to start winding down soon. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago where I was walking across the stage getting my diploma. It goes so fast. So enjoy it. Make good memories. And make it a good profession for yourself. Accept the experiences and learn from them. This is another quote that I heard recently, that nursing isn't just an art, it has a heart, and you have to have a heart for this job. There are so many times that I went home worried about clients that all I could do was pray for them at home, and I did that many times. And nursing isn't just a science, it requires a conscience. And always, always practice with a conscience. In closing, I would just like to say Happy Nurses Week to all of our nurses here today. I want to say congratulations to our student nurses who have committed their lives to this profession. Know that we need each and every one of you. Don't forget where you've come from. Be proud of who you are and stand up for yourself and all First Nations people. Looking to you to lead and represent us. Advocate for culturally safe care for our people, because we do deserve that. And to those of us who have been here for a while, give yourself and one another a hug. We've made it this far, and we are resilient Indigenous women who are carrying on the legacy of Mrs. Edith Montour. Continue to care and do it with grace and compassion for one another. Nyawa.
Yeah, my Deb, that was beautiful. And I think we also, I think some of us wanted to also give a round of applause for all those public health nurses when Deb was talking about all the dedication they had. And I know a lot of them are here today, so we'll do another round of applause for them as well. I know I was definitely appreciative for them here, and I think we all should be. And, you know, reflecting on, you know, those 12, 16-hour days Deb was talking about, those were a real reality, but I got the fortunate benefit of just being behind a computer trying to figure things out on the other end of the response. But all of our nurses here today, a lot of them were on the other side of that, right? Being on those front lines and being with the community and supporting them through that. So amazing work that our nurses do. And so definitely always a wonderful opportunity to appreciate all of that work that they do in our community. And Deb hit on a lot of things that are really important to us here at S&P, and I know to McMaster as well, in supporting Indigenous nurses and training nurses here in the community has been fundamental to being able to support them through that, and making sure that we are giving them that cultural safety training, but also supporting them not just as students, but even when they are off in their professions as nurses here in the community and all over. So definitely work we want to continue to do and support with our students here at S&P as well. So next up, we have a little bit of time left. We have a panel here that we've assembled of some more amazing nurses that we're going to ask to come up. So we have Dr. Bernice Downey. She's Anishinaabe Kwe of mixed Ojibwe and Celtic ancestry with kinship ties to St. Martin, Lake St. Martin and Dauphin River First Nations in the Treaty 2 area of Manitoba. She is a former Bachelor of Science prepared nurse. Her area of specialty in nursing included mental health, addictions, and community health promotion. She has participated and led many Indigenous nursing initiatives at the national and international level, including the advancement of cultural safety, education and training in Canada, and Indigenous nursing leadership. She is currently a medical anthropologist and is cross-appointed with the Department of Psychiatry and Neurobehavioral Sciences and the School of Nursing in the Faculty of Health Sciences at McMaster University. She's held the appointment of the inaugural Associate Dean, Indigenous Health for the Faculty of Health Sciences from 2017 to 2024. Her research interests include health literacy and Indigenous traditional knowledge and health research system reform for Indigenous populations. She currently holds the Heart and Stroke Foundation Canadian Institute of Health Research Chair in Indigenous Women's Heart and Brain Health. And she's led several other leadership positions, including the Director of McMaster's Indigenous Health Research Institute, the Regional Cancer Care Lead for Toronto Central Region, Chief Executive Officer of the National Aboriginal Health Organization, and the Executive Director of the Indigenous Nurses Association, and a board member for the Canadian Institute of Health Research, Institute of Indigenous Peoples Health. She's committed to addressing anti-Indigenous racism and the promotion of Indigenous self-determining approaches to health equity and system reform. So let's welcome Bernice. We also have Maggie Copeland. She's the Director of Health Services for Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. Ms. Copeland is a registered nurse, having graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Ryerson University. She has extensive pediatric and adult nursing experience at various healthcare facilities in the region, including McMaster Children's Hospital, Hamilton Health Sciences Center, and she is a certified First Nations health manager and sits on the board of directors for Brant County Health System, and she's a member of the Fisher River Cree Nation and has lived in Brantford for many years. So I'm going to ask Maggie, let's welcome Maggie as well. I'm going to ask Maggie, Bernice, and Deb if she'll join us again for the panel to join us. And this is an opportunity for everyone here to ask questions if they have any questions to our panelists, but we also have some prepared questions as well, just to learn more about their experiences in nursing leadership. Sorry. Everyone's passing it on. Yeah. So welcome everyone. Bernice, I just wanted to start with a question around, similar to, Deb was sharing about her pathway. If you could share a little bit about your pathway in nursing, what led you to nursing and your career in leadership in nursing?
Yes, okay, thank you. I just wanted to say miigwech to everyone here for the, also for the traditional opening and for Deb's wonderful talk there. And also to the organizers who, as I know, the devil's in the details, and so organizing things, getting the food ready, the team at the Indigenous Health Learning Lodge and here at Polytech, so thank you for that. So, I was listening to Debra's story, and as I was preparing today as well, I was thinking, like, I'm going to be retiring on June 30th, formally. But I think for our people, your work kind of takes a different direction in your retirement, but you're still working, especially nurses, I think. And so I'm kind of looking forward to supporting communities with work in that part of my retirement. But I was also reflecting on some of what Debra was talking about. When I saw that picture of Edith Montour there, when I started at the Faculty of Health Science, I remember thinking about her hard work, the advocacy, all of the things that Debra described. And I think even, I don't know how long people here have been working, but we all think about our own little nursing creation stories. And for me, it was my mother. And I remember in grade 11 saying to her, you know, Mom, I don't know what to do when I finish high school. And she was drying dishes, and she turned around and said, be a nurse. And I said, a nurse? She said, yeah. And I said, why? And she had never talked about nursing to me. And she said, well, she said, you'll always have a job. You'll be respected in your community, and you will be able to travel. And at the time, you know, I didn't think consciously, but that was her dream. And she didn't have a chance to fulfill that. She was born in Lake St. Martin, and school pathways to becoming a nurse just didn't exist back then for Indigenous people. And she passed away February 28th this year. And I remember when she was admitted to long-term care, she kind of nominated herself to be the helper. And she would walk around and she would help the other residents. And so that's how I got into nursing. And I always honored her at any gatherings that I was at, because if that hadn't happened, I probably wouldn't have gone into nursing. So that's a little bit about my story.
Miigwech, and thank you, Bernice, and thank you, Deb. It is a bit of a journey for myself. I married young, and we had 2 children young, and I just knew that there was something more for me, and so when my youngest one went to school full time is when I decided I was going to go try school, right? And prior to that, when I was just out of high school, I didn't know what to do, you know, and the talk was go to school. So I signed up and went to university, and I didn't understand a word they were saying, and it was kiboshed. I came home at Christmas time and said, no, I'm not going to do this again. And so I moved forward and had married, and the 2 little ones went, and they were in school full time. And so I approached my partner, my husband, my high school sweetheart, and said I was ready for school. And he said, sure. And so I applied for the personal support worker program at Mohawk College and loved it. Oh my goodness. I would, you know, first thing in the morning, I just couldn't wait, you know, get to class and all. And I was learning so much. And I was halfway through the program, and I saw something that really was it was disturbing. And it really infected me. And Deb talked about that. We talked about our, you know, there was mentors, people in your life, right? And so my instructor said, hey, Maggie, if you were to be a nurse, this is something that you could advocate for. And it was like a light just turned on. So how do I go about doing that? And so only way I could get into the Mohawk nursing program was for me to drop the PSW. And I'm not a quitter. So I went to PSW through continuing ed. So, and then applied for the diploma nursing. Now that was just before they made it into a 4-year program, okay? So that was back in the early 2000s. And so I started in January in the nursing diploma at Mohawk, did the PSW on weekends. So technically I was in school for 7 days. Did that for a couple months. And, but juggling, you know, kids, after school programming, my lessons, and going to clinical, and et cetera, But I was driven, I was excited because I loved what I was being taught. And it was so invigorating learning about the pathways of caring and where it would lead you. And so I was so inspired, and I was realizing that there's so many avenues of where you can work in. There was home and community care, there was long-term care, there was all these different areas. And so I was excited about it all, and so I told my husband that I was going to become a nurse. And he said, sure, okay, that sounds good. How are the kids? I said, I've got it all figured out. So we managed, and a year goes by. Oh, that was the other thing too. I decided I was going to do a fast track, okay? So instead of just taking a semester off, I decided to just go on, right? And so 1 year passes, and he's sitting there going, are you done yet? And I said, oh, no. And I said, I've got another year to go. So, so I did the year and fast-tracked it and got my nursing diploma. So he thought it was all done. And I wasn't, because I find nursing has opened so many more opportunities. It gets you thinking about other areas of specialties. And so throughout my career, I've worked from little ones, from babies to adults to elderly, and in palliative care. And having that opportunity to see the life in general from beginning to end. And it's an honor, it's a privilege as nurses to be at that bedside at any point in life. And so I'm in nursing, and one of the things that the Creator, I wanted to work for First Nations. And so my career took me everywhere along the way. And in this, I'm just talking about why I ended up at the New Credit. So here I was in the middle of the ER at McMaster, and I had a family come in, and they said they were looking for a nurse. And at that time I said, no, that's not for me. I'm here in the ER, I'm pretty comfortable. And the Creator has amazing. Here I was, I said, okay, had an incident, and I applied, and by Christmas of 2016, I was with my family in Florida, got the call that they wanted to interview me. So I ended up getting the job at the Credit, and it's my dream job, and I've loved it ever since. Big witch.
I just wanted to add that I'm not going to go through my whole career, because you'd all be gone home for supper, and I'd be talking to myself. But I just wanted to say that after a lengthy career in clinical nursing, where my specialty was in mental health and addictions, I took a job with the Indigenous Nurses Association of Canada. And I thought I would emphasize that a little bit here today, because really what I wanted to leave you with was a few words on leadership in nursing. And so when I got that position, I didn't know much about the Indigenous Nurses Association. At that time, it was called the Aboriginal Nurses Association. But and so I felt a little bit unprepared. But Debra had talked about praying and trying to understand why certain things happen in your life, and that's what I did. I thought, I'm just going to trust that I'm here for a reason. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm going to do the best I can. And what that taught me was about the fellowship, the sisterhood, and the leadership in Indigenous nursing. And actually, this is the 50th year that the organization has existed. It started in 1975, and it was 14 Indigenous nurses from across the country that came together in Montreal because they needed fellowship. They were having trouble working either in institutions or in their home communities, and they needed to talk about that and come together and figure out how to support each other. And so they started this association, and their mission, if you look it up online, remains as relevant today as it did back then. So during my time there, I feel like that was the change agent part of my career. because it was a membership association, it required me to learn advocacy skills for the members, but it also required me to learn about interface with the government, interface with other mainstream nursing organizations, with education, like the whole realm of networking and understanding, how to influence and how to create change. But also what I recall is a focus on external change, essentially a necessary component to be able to do our work. And so both speakers here had talked about, wanting to work for their communities. But I found that a lot of the time in my career, I was working to help raise awareness, educate, and change external to me as a leader, external to our communities. It's always about teaching other people how to work with us. And so I found over the years that even though that collaboration and advocacy was an important element of the work to create change, that it often leaves us as nurse leaders lacking in the opportunity or the capacity to lead from within, I call it. And so that is, what do you bring to your own work as a nurse leader? Not only mainstream skills of understanding finance and public health laws and being able to operate in pandemics, but where is the time and the opportunity and the resources for us to bring who we are into our nursing? And so perhaps you have connections to healers and community. Perhaps you have another part of the skills and gift sets that you were given about natural healing. And there has been a time in nursing and in other healthcare professions where that was not only frowned upon, but you would lose your license if you attempted to integrate any of that into your practice. So we are just on the cusp of beginning to take that time for ourselves. And that's really one of the messages that I wanted to leave you with today. So the other part is that what I painfully learned is that we are often restricted by our own people. And so you recognize leadership skills, or you're being asked to be a leader as a nurse with wisdom and experience. And it's sometimes within your own communities or among your own people that you get pushback. And I have always found that those situations to be more painful than anything I have gone through in mainstream situations where I've worked. And so I think those things also need to be explored. And as a nurse leader, often you are called upon to figure those things out. But where are our mentors? And I think both, again, acknowledge the need for mentorship. So the provincial chapters of Indigenous nursing associations have been established, but perhaps it is the regional and local level work. Because I look around this room and it's amazing and wonderful for me to see everybody here. I know a couple of people had to leave, but to see each other networking and supporting each other, having a piece of cake and just talking amongst ourselves. But I also think that it is the students and it is those, those faces yet to come who aren't even in nursing school that we need to be mentoring from that young age to even get through those pathways into nursing. I think some are failing at that, and we have not established a robust mechanism to advocate for them and to encourage them and walk beside them as they're trying to get into nursing school. So that has been much my career pathway, and it did require me to go back to school. Because as a nurse, baccalaureate prepared, I had a laddered experience too. I was in the diploma program. I went back to do the undergrad, one course at a time. It took me 9 years, working full-time, raising a family through the University of Ottawa. It was one course a semester. But at the end, I was finally done. And then it was shortly after that I realized that I needed to do the graduate level study. And I think this, we're making good headway on getting our learners into undergraduate programs, but the graduate level is where we need to go next. So we need nurses who are master's and doctoral prepared so that we can grow our own faculty, so that the education and curricula, the policy work at the leadership level is influenced by our own, not just having us at the table telling other people what they think they should do, but that we're actually the ones doing it. So that's an important element. And so that's what I did. And what I found, you had mentioned the Dorothy Wiley Leadership Institute, and there are some great leadership programs out there, but they're not always meeting our needs. And so that is something that we're doing at the Indigenous Health Learning Lodge, and I wanted to mention that to you today, that we are in a pilot phase for healthcare leaders. So we wanted to make sure that it was, we were recruiting leaders from community and from academia, and we have some nurses and some from other healthcare fields, and it's We Lift Them Up is the program. And so we're in that pilot phase, and it is that opportunity to delve and lead from within, to understand who you are as an Indigenous person, what are the gifts and skills and knowledge that you bring into your nursing, no matter what field you're in, and how do we expand, foster, and grow that. And so we have a year-long program with mentors who are assigned to the individual participants. And then at the end of the year, we'll come back to hear more about how they achieve those objectives. So that's just one particular activity that we're involved with at the Learning Lodge, and that will be evaluated and hopefully expand. So I think that's the message I wanted to bring, is that we are all leaders already because we are nurses, but that there is opportunity for growth and fulfillment and coming together to foster that nursing from within, or that leadership from within. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, Bernice. Was there any other questions? I do have another one, but if the audience had any questions, I wanted to give that opportunity as well, too. No? Okay, so I know Bernice brought up one important point about, the challenges of working cross-culturally in terms of nursing care and leadership. And I just wanted to ask the panel if they had any thoughts on or experiences on how they navigate that as nursing professionals.
I guess for myself, with my career, with the federal government for 25 years, I often came across that challenge. Although we were in First Nations communities, that was our focus. I worked with a lot of different nationalities of nurses in that work. And it was challenging. I found myself sometimes very frustrated being part of the federal government and always having to educate. I think, Bernice talked about that, and also listening to opinions from people who didn't really know what it was like to live, to work in First Nations communities. And so when I found my voice, I started to ask those hard questions of colleagues. What I was seeing was very much programs that were being developed with little community input, then being implemented in a First Nations community that were not meeting the needs of that community. And then we'd sit back and scratch our heads and wonder, well, why isn't this working? We had such a great idea. It's because you didn't engage the community. That's why. And so at some of those planning tables, like I said, I knew I had to say something. And so at one of the meetings, I did speak up and I said, how many here have actually went to a First Nations community to see what it's like before we start planning? And there was silence. There was silence across the table. And I said, maybe that's where we should start. Let's start by going to the community and talking to them about what their needs are, and then develop programs based on what those needs are. It isn't rocket science. And I think that's where we have to start looking at speaking from who we are, knowing what's best for our people, and not being afraid to talk about it. You're there for a reason. And I know that was difficult for some people to hear, but at the same time, I felt, you asked me to be here. You asked me to sit at this table. I'm giving you my honest input. And my expectation as a First Nations nurse is that that feedback is going to be incorporated in how we respond to this issue. I think it's difficult because I was working with a lot of people who were not Indigenous, and that understanding isn't always there. So it's challenging. And I think, you know, in my role as director, one of the things that I'm always thinking about is how our people are being treated off reserve when they enter the healthcare system. Last year, we seen that really, you know, pushed to the forefront when Ontario hospitals were engaging in developing reconciliation plans. And my office was getting phone calls quite regularly where we had hospital administrators asking things like, what do we include in a land acknowledgement? Do you have an elder in your community that we can engage on our working group? And I felt fearful for our elders to be approached independently by these tables, wanting them to sit because they were Indigenous. And so what we decided to do was, let's hold an information session here at Six Nations, and we called it the Path to Reconciliation because we knew they were having to create those plans. And it was a day of learning. We had Lonnie Bunbury come and talk about our land claims so that people understood why we were doing what we were doing. And he talked about, before you think about land acknowledgement, know the history of the land. We had our very own Amber Sky talk about, you know, the history, how colonialism, our history, has informed how our patients behave in the healthcare system today. They're fearful, and why that is. And we had the groups that were there, so we invited hospital CEOs, we invited their boards, and we invited their senior leadership within hospitals to come and listen to this 2 days. We had an exercise for them that, based on Lonnie's presentation, Amber's presentation, we now want you to think about what should you include in your reconciliation plan. So they spent some time working together and then came back with just mini presentations. The promise I had them make was that it doesn't stop here. Again, we have to create this relationship. So I'm happy to report that tomorrow is our 6-month check-in. All of the hospitals have committed to a 6-month check-in. They've now taken that learning from 2 days, those 2 days, they've gone back to their hospitals, and they're coming up with a reconciliation plan that we get to go tomorrow and see. They're going to present them. And then I've also had them commit to annually, we will get together after tomorrow where we can do that check-in to see what have they accomplished with their reconciliation plans, and how do we help support them with the barriers that they face. So it's creating that relationship with those hospitals to ensure that they're going to operate with our people in mind, and that the experiences for our people will be better. So to me, that's part of leadership. Is it's not just about advocating, but it's also about creating pathways to teach people, because we do have a responsibility in some regard to help them, because if we don't help them, then we have situations like I spoke of earlier where they create plans without us and then wonder why they don't work in our communities.
Miigwech. Thank you, Deb. In my situation, I think as I had shared earlier, when I see something, I kind of go for it, and I kind of go like all hands, like full steam ahead. And so when it comes to as a First Nations Indigenous woman, in working in a non-Indigenous environment like Hamilton Health Science in a big corporation, seeing the disparities and inequities firsthand, this was very, very troublesome. And having, being in that position of putting myself in front of the patient on behalf of them so that their voices could be heard when decisions were being made about them without having the full understanding of what they were agreeing to. So that area can be very blurry and gray. And so being in that position where it actually happened on a regular basis of being in front with and walking that journey with clients and patients. So I knew that I would be eventually, I'd like to be working for our First Nations community. Well, one of the things is that, as Bernice was talking about, is leadership skills. Opportunities of where can you gain additional leadership skills. Nursing school, it motivated me, inspired me. And so in my journey, I came across the First Nations Health Managers, and that is a certified program. It is a really in-depth program, and it's made by First Nations for First Nations from a national level. And one of the things I find about in a First Nations communities is, and Deb mentioned that too, about working up the north, right, and working south. Is that no matter where we're located, as far west or as far east as we are still dealing with ISC, Indigenous Service Canada, from a national level. And so one of the things I found is advocating from a nation to nation, and when and having that the skills and the tools being taught by the First Nations Health Managers. And it's a credentialed program, so I have to keep up my credentials. I have to do extra workshops and such, and pay a fee for this. And it is something that is relevant. It is tools that will, it's things that, like for example, cancer. It really impacts us all, but from a First Nations perspective, how are we as young leaders and leaders, how can we be able to advocate for our First Nations? So what I've done is I've taken courses to enhance the skills I already have, and also is learning from others, and to the role that I play. One of the things is, again, when it hits here, when it really hits here, when you see something that doesn't look right or feel right, as I always said to my kids, if it doesn't look right, smell right, you got to say something, And, so with that, it comes from here when I speak up, when I see the disparity and the inequities, and why does this family get it off reserve, non-Indigenous, and it's so challenging for members here, so being in that position, and I'm sitting on the Brant Community Healthcare System. I'm a board member. I've been sitting there since 2018, and being able to have a voice at that table, and stopping that and asking, says, why don't we get more stories about our treatments? Why can't we have more space for families to come in when their loved one is unwell? And so these are kind of things, and I think it's so exciting because I think of it as a ripple effect. You know how you throw a stone in, you get little ripples, So it's sort of the same thing with First Nations and leaders. We have Bernice here and her ripple. We have Deb and her ripple, right? And we have the Polytech with their ripple, right? So a combination of ripples. Can you just imagine the wave, right? So that's just so inspiring for me. Thank you. Miigwech.
Could I just say one last thing with 2 minutes left?
Yeah.
I think that racism and discrimination is alive and well, and that our people continue to face it in the institutions where they attend. We've done a lot of talking as far back as Edith Montour, who couldn't get admitted to a nursing school anywhere in Canada. And I remember I saw the WIN speaker profile of her that first year that I was at MAC. And I used that as an opportunity to talk about what she had experienced at McMaster, and that McMaster still had its work to do in the nursing program. And so I think in education, in clinical work, in research, we have to call it what it is in order to change it. And we experience it ourselves as healthcare providers. There's not a lot of people to support workers with that. And there are EDI programs now that want to lump Indigenous issues underneath that. That's not okay in my books. But I think we have to continue to, as my colleagues are saying, to call it out and recognize and call it out, and to be specific for our patients, because there's still a lot of institutions that have not done their work in this regard. So I wanted to make sure to say that.
Thank you, Bernice. Yes, I definitely agree. That's something I tell my students all the time, right? Don't be afraid to call it what it really is, right? And use that language, because people need to feel that, and know that this is what is being done, right? This is what they're engaging in, and that really helps to push forward these messages. And definitely what SNP has striving to do with our nursing program here, continuing to grow our nursing program, our student base. Right now, we just finished pinning 45 nursing students last month here at SNP. And we have another 60 students right now in their second semester of the nursing program. So, and I know there's a lot of graduates of the nursing program here at SNP, and I think that speaks. I think we're going on 20 years now of delivering the practical nursing program here at SNP, and growing our, like Bernice said, growing our faculty, right? A lot of our faculty now here at SNP are homegrown, right? They're nursing faculty that have they're nursing students that have graduated here at SNP, went on to get graduate level education, and they're coming back to SNP to teach our nursing students. And so that is an amazing experience for our community and for our students, but we're growing that ability to do that here, and I think that's really amazing. And so I can only see these events growing for us here, and I'm looking forward to opportunities, as always, to work with our students, and like Bernice said, mentoring them. That mentorship is really important, and with the growing body of graduates and opportunities here at Six Nations, I think that mentorship network is going to continue to grow. And so we're really thankful for everybody that comes back and everybody that continues to support our students, including our speakers here today. And I know we have to end. We're a couple minutes over time, but I have some gifts here that I'd like to present them with for taking the time to share. And like Bernice said, we want to thank the McMaster University Indigenous Health Healing Lodge for partnering in this event with us and planning and all the work that went into that. And we hope to continue to be able to offer this for our students. Okay, so I think there's some cake left, but before we close up officially, Elon's gonna come and do our closing.
Dananda, Nanigan, good, and this what the whole see us can go in, so what don't. Downey did, Sanawe, one in Shade, a Gwego did, Nagan, a guy Hawaii, the Nadi, Nagan, and did way for Canto, Nansen is and go for Yasi, how we on you go yanda, and go home, go dog, and well, don't go any quacks on. Downey did and the Downey Doctor Gay, a son again. Go drop Swio, thank you, Scott, don't congan, gone go home, or go yan duck net and the Johnny go here stick. The works don't hand it, you go for the on door, and they're gonna hook that shot. The do one egg on the one shot dig, scan not the nanga, you go drain on the gat nanga, near good dog did warrior, or son nanga, scan on and one off the new. Scan no hand it nanga, it want to go her day new. Da and we hig the your Scott nanga and G warrior, now I'm going to go her song. Scott can a net and it's do then hold you, that again your trunk, now I'm going to go her. And our net of guardi, now and it was true we. Nay, it in what once again, now young boy should have drop. To get home in there, go now, high and toe. Don't I the hong scan no, I gone done hong go once again, now go yard the ghost ha. Downey did now go dog gas and you no need for that nest and near her. And we hate the owner, Scotty Nanga, Sokwa, we know ni. On a Nanga, Nando's 18 honyo, and 18 more once again, then go to the condrapo. You go to any hard day on Sany hard that again your tongue now and go on go home. And our net to body, now and it was true we. Then it's any ho ya, nay, nagging again, quaggy. Now we go cost and go home, Sany on what they hunt on you. Touch niggas, and how in on here. Downey did now, none and down you, so how that nanga gonna turn go no. Now the new doctor get so hard day on. The nanga go the way and go scan on and one off the new. Downey did now and we hig. On an end of the way and only, on an end of 18 honyo. Also said one of honyo, go to now how they hunt on your hot go, that again your tongue now going to go home. And our net of body, now and it was true we. Now Nick getting good dog again, I don't hear cure no. Nick and Nick don't get sick. A great scan on and one off the new. Downey did now the yoke song, nay, honky huggy. Nay, how did the boy show hank, now how do you did Nick call the new, and horse scan on and one off the new. Downey did now and we hig, or now and what they were ya no ni. On a naddy, Tino honyo, getting good dog again, I don't hear cure no. Now do you can't, don't. Downey go to hand it, nanga, that's said why you're dying. Now it's to go on, it's gonna die you. But the gas and your shaggy, or young ducks and the honey go hold and go your gay hand draw. And we hate the owner hand near nanga, said one on you, that again your tongue now and go on to go home. And our net to get home nanga and she joked up. San Hove nanga, town one jardí, go your gay hand draw, nation go edition. Downey did now, how definition gay, how the Sunday gay, how they on nanga, to St. Twine gay, while don't know how they don't shop. And Downey did now and we hig or now and what they were ya no ni. Downey did now get the said one of your home hot gay, go here gay, and now agree, nation go edition, that again your tongue can go on to go home. That's we hig the to the ni nanga, na God quay ni. Then the new horse got short on that, nay, agree on hold on, now gonna on your one initial day. Downey did now say to one nigga, getting good dog in, now don't hear cure no. Nay, nigga go scan no, now some key station how we can go again, Joe. Ho Hondono go to Congo horse and nanga, now the young good of one year. That's we hig the to the ni nanga, na God queen, and the new horse, that again your tongue now going to go hard, don't it?
Now, Aileen, that concludes our event for today. And like I said, there's still a little bit of food left. So anybody wanted to take food back, maybe for someone at the office who didn't make it out, feel free to do so.